Spoiler alert, you've been warned. Shadow of the Erdtree gave us a lot of new stuff. New weapons, new dungeons, new bosses, new romances, and even a new tree. It was basically Christmas, but more than all of this brand new stuff packaged in just a $40 bundle, we were also given tons of new mysteries to try to solve, some of which are proving to be a bit more difficult than others. For those of you who have been fans of FromSoft's Soulsborne games for a while though, you know that a DLC adding more questions than answers is nothing new. So here's my list of the top 10 brand new unsolved mysteries from Shadow of the Erdtree. Keep in mind, however, that even though I happen to have tried my best to answer these mysteries and have deemed them quote-unquote unsolvable for now, it's entirely possible that you, yes, you watching and hearing my voice right now, saw something that I didn't, or maybe have an answer that I wasn't thinking of. So in that case, please feel free to drop your thoughts and findings in the comments below should you have anything to share, and you never know, it might get turned into a video. With full credits, of course. You could also just leave a comment down there saying hi, which would also be nice. Anyway, at number 10, starting off with one of the largest mysteries, there's an extremely large dragon carcass located in the southeastern portion of the map. And when I say large, I mean that as in incomprehensibly massive. This dragon is so huge that it's even drawn on the map and can be seen from quite a ways off. And this isn't even the first time we've seen an incredibly large dragon corpse that's essentially just part of the map. The first one is over in Lanedale from the base game and is nearly as big as the new carcass. But even though we do know a bit more about the Lanedale dragon corpse, such as its name, Gransax, and even the reason it was there, we still don't know how exactly it got to be the size that it was. And in the case of this new dead dragon, not only is it a mystery as to just how and why it grew to be this massive, especially since we now know that the oldest dragon of them all is actually Bale, we also don't know its name, much less anything concrete regarding its purpose or lore. Just that it's big, it's dead, it's located right by the jagged peak upon which Bale the Dread resides, and it's the location of the Grand Altar of Dragon Communion. It also has a giant hole punched in its chest that more than likely resulted directly in its heart getting scooped out, since after all it is located right by the altar where dragon hearts are consumed in communion. We could speculate all day long about its lore given its Drake appearance and missing heart, and whether or not it was Bale who killed it, or whether or not it's the body of Florisax, the ancient dragon before she transformed, but ultimately this is a mystery that I have a feeling will persist for quite a while. And speaking of dragons, at number 9 we have the curious case regarding Bale the Dread and his history with the Dragon Lord Placidusax. See, there's plenty we actually do know about their shared backstories, such as the fact that Bale is apparently the oldest of all the dragons, and father to the entire lowborn race of drakes, which were hated by Placidusax and his ancient dragons and actually hunted down, and used as fodder for Dragon Communion, in order to make human drake warriors stronger in the hopes that they would one day rise up to be able to defeat Bale. Placidusax's loyal servant Florisax even gave up her ancient dragon form to become a humanoid in order to serve as the Dragon Communion priestess and guide the Drake warriors onward toward their ultimate goal of defeating Bale, which she even tries to encourage you to do when you first meet her. The thing is, all of this rivalry started after Bale assaulted Placidusax, resulting in both dragons leaving the fight pretty banged up and missing lots of limbs and even heads. However, we have absolutely no idea why Bale did this in the first place. Lots of fans assume that essentially Big Angry Dragon does Big Angry Dragon things and Bale must have wanted to kill the Dragon Lord because he didn't want to be ruled or something, which is a fine explanation, but we also have reason to believe that Bale's hatred of Placidusax was at least somewhat warranted beyond simple emotions, since there were actually some ancient dragons that also betrayed the Dragon Lord and joined forces with Bale. What happened to make this dragon-on-dragon war break out? And what, if anything, does it have to do with Placidusax's current entombment in Faramazula outside of time, or the god that he once served whose return he's still awaiting to this day? As of the present, I don't think we currently have these answers. Switching gears for number 8, what exactly are the giant stone coffins present all over the place in the southern shore? The majority of them are actually located deep within a fissure that's notably inaccessible before Miquella breaks his great rune that is appropriately called the Stone Coffin Fissure. Now, we do have a few hints as to what is inside them. They appear to be made of a substance called putrescence, as the mass of putrescence sorcery and congealed putrescence crafting items indicate. According to the Remembrance of Putrescence, which drops from the Putrescent Knight boss, this putrescence substance is simply decayed flesh, which makes sense since that's what the word putrid means in real life. It's also stated that the lives kept within the coffins are impure, and the congealed putrescence does kind of resemble the other impure life form we know of from the base game, the Silver Tears, and the coffins do kind of resemble the architecture of the Nox. But that is literally all we know about the stone coffins, period. We don't know who made them, we don't know how they got here, why they're so big or why there are so many, or what, if any, the connection is between their putrescent innards and Silver Tears. I'd be happy with just one of those answers. Number 7 is about the character that we all thought would have a much bigger influence in the DLC than he ended up having, Messmer the Impaler, who serves as essentially the mini-boss of the DLC. And really, we know just about everything there is to know about Messmer's backstory, who his mother is, why he slaughters people mercilessly and burns them at the stake, why he turns into a snake, and even who his little sister is. It's Melina, and we burn them both. But the one question that we don't currently have an answer for is the matter of Messmer's father, as in who is he? Obviously Messmer the demigod has flaming red hair, and the other flaming red-headed demigods are all children of Radagon, who is, you guessed it, a flaming red-headed individual. However, since Messmer is more than likely Marika's first child, this greatly implies that it was before her children she had with Godfrey. And this Who's the Father game we're playing seems to be backed up by the Hornsent Grandam, who straight up throws shade at Marika and calls her a strumpet, which is Old English for, you know, harlot. Messmer also has an affinity for fire, as you may have guessed, and this, added to the visage of the fire furnaces apparently looking like the fell god, as well as the fire giant imagery on the furnace's thighs, places the possibility of Messmer's father being the fell god himself at the forefront. As a reminder, it's also possible that Radagon himself is related to the fire giant somehow. Another possibility is that Marika straight up had a kid with the base serpent itself, which Messmer was cursed with from birth. The only hint we have to this, though, is the very base serpent-looking shed snakeskin located outside Bonnie Village, which is clearly a location that was known as being related to Marika's story. In fact, the statue that we get the O Mother gesture from, which unlocks Marika's home village, is found immediately in front of this snakeskin. And if you're curious about Marika's story in the DLC, check out my previous video covering exactly that. But where's the true answer as to Messmer's lineage? It eludes us still. Speaking of Marika, for number 6, we have to ask yet again what exactly went down in the scene with her approaching and standing inside of the Gate of Divinity. The extremely climactic scene apparently holds the secrets for just about everything. The birth of the Erdtree and Shadow Trees, the creation of the Golden Order, the banishment of the Land of Shadow, and Marika's ascension into godhood, and it all revolves around a seduction and betrayal. There are many mysteries in this scene alone, but to isolate just one for now, I'd like to ask the simple question of what even is the Gate of Divinity anyway? If you've seen my Marika story video, you know that I think there's a stark possibility that this Gate of Divinity is the or a crucible, from which the Hornsent draw much of their powers from, such as the Spiral, and from which the Erdtree evolved. If you'd like a more in-depth look at what exactly a crucible is in the lore of Elden Ring, once again, please feel free to check out my Marika video after you're done here. But ultimately, we just don't know if this is the case. I mean, it doesn't appear to be fully made out of bodies. There just appears to be a bunch of bodies plastered onto it. And I guess the same could be said for the structure of Anir Ilum itself, which appears to be either made of bodies straight up or have bodies plastered onto it. Either way, whatever it is allows for some sort of communication between the Greater Will and an Empyrean who would be a god. So who knows, maybe it's just a pre-existing structure that the Greater Will itself placed here at the beginning of time. For number 5, we're going to switch things up again and talk about something that I know is in the game somewhere that nobody has found yet. And that is an alternate ending regarding the one person we do witness become a god inside the Gate of Divinity, Miquella the Kind himself. If you've watched my Miquella story video, you already know where I'm going with this, but in a nutshell, basically, I found in the game's text dump some dialogue from Miquella that is nowhere to be found in the game just yet, which reads as follows. I hereby swear, to every living being and every living soul, now comes the age of our Eden, a 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion. Beginning here, love encompasses all. No living thing will be denied, no deed censured. I am ready to embrace the whole of it. Let us go together. Radahn, my promised consort. Most notably, this dialogue is extremely similar to Zullie the Witch's dialogue when she's accepting her new destiny as the god of her new order.
I do solemnly swear to every living being and every living soul, now cometh the age of the stars, 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon. Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond, into fear, doubt, and loneliness. Well then, shall we, my fair consort eternal?
So, in my opinion, there must be a hidden Miquella ending somewhere in the game, and I'm assuming it would require for us to not, kill him, which would kind of prevent his takeover of the world. This one's actually kind of a cry for help. To anyone out there who's even remotely curious about this cut dialogue, please try anything. The whole internet would like to know how to choose to assist Miquella with his quest to make the world a gentler place. And if you do find something, be sure to return here and let us know all about it in the comments below. Speaking of Miquella's ending, I'm sure you all know by now that in a drastic plot twist, the likes of which hasn't been seen since Shrek 5 was announced the other day, Miquella apparently chose his half-brother, Radahn, to be his king consort and resurrected him inside the carcass of Mohg, his other brother, in order to fulfill this decision. And take a moment to soak that up if you need to. Trust me, I understand. We even get a cutscene detailing Miquella's request directly to Radahn, presumably. The thing is, we have literally no text anywhere in the game that gives us an idea of what Radahn's response was to this request. We have no idea if he was on board with the idea or against it. To fans like myself, I tend to think that he was against the idea since Malenia took it upon herself to essentially force him into a new body, by way of committing death upon him, but lots of fans also seem to think that Radahn was all for the idea and this was simply a friendly sparring session because he just likes fighting that ended in a nuke going off. Regardless, we cannot currently know whether or not Radahn consented to his soul being placed in his other brother's body, or why Miquella didn't at least resurrect Leonard, his trusty horse, alongside Radahn, which is the whole reason why Radahn learned gravity magic in the first place. I mean, come on, man. Number 3 is actually a recurring mystery from the base game that makes an even greater impact in the DLC, and that is the giant, burning, overarching question of why the Greater Will has such a tendency to just abandon its people. In the base game, we're told in the intro cutscene to the game that the Greater Will has straight up abandoned the world. Finger Reader Enya states that it has renounced each and every demigod, and the two fingers of Round Table Hold can't really seem to get a response from the big man upstairs when they really needed one. In the DLC, we actually meet the first of the intergalactic living shooting star enemies that the Greater Will placed on the planet, and her name is Meter, the Mother of Fingers. And she actually is the mother of all the fingers. That's not just a figure of speech. The creepy ones and also the two fingers, which are also creepy. She isn't the mother of the three fingers though, as far as we can tell, but that's a whole other thing. The thing is, Meter was also abandoned by the Greater Will, as we can see from the Staff of the Great Beyond description, for literally no reason at all that we can deduce, which is surprising, especially since she's referred to as the gleaming daughter of the Greater Will. So her betraying or otherwise not following the Greater Will seems very unlikely. This begs the question of why the Greater Will keeps placing people or entities in power as leaders or messengers and then abandoning them sequentially, and also leads us to ask if the Greater Will has been gone for a really long time and we've just been going off the whims of the two fingers who are guessing at the Greater Will's will this entire time. A mystery to this day. At number 2, we have perhaps the most obvious mystery of them all that everyone kind of forgot to ask, but seriously, what is the Shadow Tree? And I know that Miyazaki himself is really fond of saying stuff like, obviously the Shadow Tree is the shadow of the Erdtree, but like, last I checked, shadows are much flatter. This one looks pretty 3D to me. An entire other tree, in fact. So in the first place, how is that possible? And in the second place, how is the Shadow Tree supposed to be the opposite of the Erdtree and its grace, when the Shadow Tree also extends grace to its denizens, apparently with no difference at all except for just a little bit of a darker tone? For all intents and purposes, it really does appear to function exactly the same as the Erdtree, complete with having remembrances of individuals hewn into it for their rebirths. I guess this can only be answered if we know exactly what Marika did to create the Erdtree and her Golden Order in general, but it's still strange that we've played through the entire DLC and we still know nothing more about the Shadow Tree than we did from its first teaser image. And speaking of the teaser image, that's actually going to be mystery number 1. But before we get to that, let's cover a few honorable mentions real quick. First, what exactly is Saint Trina? We've all known she's Miquella's alter ego for a while now, but ever since the DLC released, we can now also see that she is literally another physical person, a la Marika and Ratigan. But in addition to this, she's also not exactly human. she's a plant, or is transforming into a plant. Either way, she's also described as Miquella's love, and upon his casting her aside, ended up making her bleed and resulted in her being one of the only NPCs in the game that actively opposes Miquella's plans. But still, what is she? Next, does the Land of Shadow physically fit inside the lands between? It appears to be more of another extended land entirely rather than an alternate reality of the same lands between, since most if not all of the landmarks are completely different and some of them seemingly extend from their alleged lands between counterparts. However, this is also something we still know absolutely nothing about. Although if this cutscene is ever found that appears to show Miquella healing the Shadow Tree and the shadow curtains above it, which are apparently responsible for hiding the Land of Shadow away from the real world, then maybe we'd get an answer. The final honorable mention is another Miquella mystery, and it has to do with his time before entering the Land of Shadow. See, we never had any indication in the base game that once the shattering took place, Miquella went anywhere, aside from within his Haligtree and then getting stolen away by Mohg and taken to Mohgwyn Palace. However, in the DLC, we meet a former Redmane warrior known as Freya, who apparently was fighting in the swamp of Aeonia and got struck in the face by someone or something that infected her with the Scarlet Rot, meaning this was after Malenia's Scarlet Nuke went off after the Shattering. At this point, she claims that Miquella himself found her where she was abandoned in the swamp in Caelid and healed her face wound by kissing it. So why was Miquella in Caelid at this point, and how is it that he now has healing magic? And if he could reverse the effects of the Scarlet Rot instead of just pausing it, why didn't he do that to his sister? Why then did he have to do any of this godhood quest if he already figured out how to cure his sister? The mysteries abound. At long last, the final mystery is also the most close to home, and it regards Torrent, our trusty steed. Why is Miquella riding him? In the teaser image for the DLC, Miquella is shown famously riding Torrent through the Land of Shadow. This would be less mysterious if this image was of his previous travels or something like that. And I mean, it would even give some credence to the age-old mystery of who Torrent's quote-unquote former owner was that we've been trying to solve since day one. However, we know for a fact that Miquella is running around in the Land of Shadow at the same time that we are. He isn't able to enter the Land of Shadow until Mohg is killed, which Leda alludes to and states multiple times throughout the DLC that he's currently heading to and fro across the land. We also literally witness Miquella break his Great Rune, which ends up in the possession of the Shadow Tree avatar. So we know he was at least up here and traveled all over the place discarding pieces of himself until he ended up here, which as a reminder he could not access until we, the Tarnished, killed Messmer and used his kindling to burn the Sealing Tree. So if Miquella is running around the Land of Shadow at the same time that we are, that heavily implies that this image is taking place at the same time as well. But we have Torrent. So how is this possible? It's a mystery for sure, but I will point out that the Torrent Miquella is shown riding in the image is notably missing a saddle. So could it be that Miquella simply has another spectral steed? Torrent's sibling maybe? Maybe Torrent was one of a twin of spectral steeds that were given to Miquella and Malenia, and the Torrent that we have used to be Malenia's. Who knows? And that's the end of my list of the top 10 biggest unsolved mysteries in the Elden Ring DLC, plus a couple bonus. Like I mentioned earlier though, it's very possible you have another conclusion to one of these mysteries that I wasn't thinking of. If so, I'd love to hear all about them in the comments below. And also, leave your biggest mysteries that you'd like answers on that I might not have mentioned in this video in the comments as well. And like I said, who knows, I might just tackle them in an upcoming lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider leaving a like if you enjoyed the list or at least my efforts into making it. And again, make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. Huge thanks as always to my bandit crew who make my day every day with their support. And that's all I've got for this one. So as always, this is Bandit, looking forward to seeing you next time and signing out. Peace!